This week, we're in the Peloton, well, with me, Nick Hanmer from Club Peloton. David Taylor and Toby from Velocity magazine are going to take you through the next steps. Over to you.
Hello, Nick. It's great to have you back as a real human being, cycling through northern France as we are. Obviously, the guys behind us are a bit static, I thought.
Is he definitely a real human being, David?
Well, I'm not sure entirely, but we'll check that out with our intense questioning, which we'll do over the next 20 or so minutes. There is a Q&A function at the bottom for your questions, which we'd love to hear and respond to. If we don't get through them all, Nick and team will attend to them on the website. Nick, can I first start with you and ask how you've been? You're back from furlough. How was furlough? What was the whole experience like for you?
Back from furlough, it's great to be back. Myself and the team are only back for 1 day a week at the moment. Chris, Rhiannon and Charlotte, they were all off from the start of April and have only just come back, whereas myself, I went off at the start of May and did 2 periods of furlough. But I've built a tree house.
Right.
I've shifted my migraines pretty seismically. Their frequency is now every 6 weeks rather than once every 10 days.
Excellent.
Is that as a result of building a tree house?
Yeah. But no, furlough's been great. Furlough's been great.
And so just going back to that weird period where everything, if you can remember back to that period where everything was in flux about whether or not the MIPIM ride would happen, could you just rehearse a bit of that and the stresses you went through and all the non-communication presumably there was about what you had and couldn't do from government? What was it like?
It was certainly, it was a huge decision for us, and a very difficult decision, but the right decision. At the time, government advice was that you could still travel, but that was against the backdrop of an emerging pandemic, businesses pulling out of MIPIM, riders pulling out of MIPIM, and then MIPIM itself being cancelled. And in the end, the health and well-being and safety of everybody, and I guess the long-term success of Club Peloton, the right thing to do was to cancel. And it broke our hearts because everyone has worked so hard for months and months preparing for the event. It's the biggest event that we do in our calendar, and so it was very testing. But once the decision had been made, it felt right straight away, and so I had confidence in that we'd done the right thing, and the messages of support came through straight away that thanking us for doing that.
And what are your thoughts about the next MIPIM? If we can just jump forward quickly to that, do you think in March next year we may be in a position where this whole thing can get back on the road?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think we need to know that people want to go to MIPIM as a conference. We need to be sure that people want to ride their bikes abroad. Obviously economically, we have got a very difficult year to 18 months ahead of us as a country and as an industry. So we're going to be going out to the Club Peloton community and asking them what their plans are and what their business's plans are, and then mapping those sentiments and feelings over a number of months to see which way we're heading. I mean, I would love to say right now that we're cycling to MIPIM. I think if we are cycling to MIPIM, it will be under different circumstances, a different style possibly. We need to think about
like this.
Well, like this. I mean, yes, a virtual cycle to MIPIM, but we need to think about how we socially distance. Yes, we could do that virtually. But at the end of the day, we all love getting out on our bikes, and there's only so much kind of riding you can do on a turbo. So we need to find a way to bring people together safely.
Can I just say there's only so much riding you can do around Regent's Park as well. So, any kind of forward motion would be beyond the circle would be really welcome, I'm sure. Nick, take us back a bit. Not everybody was lucky enough to see the early issue of Velocity when David did that excellent interview with you. and you talked a little bit about your kind of hinterland, you know, how you got into all of this. What is your background? How do you end up being the chief exec of Club Peloton?
I think, like a lot of things, by accident. I never set out to be where I am now. And that's kind of the lovely thing about life, is that opportunities open up. And Peter Murray, who set up the Cycle to MIPIM ride back in 2006, had ridden an event that I'd organised for the Royal British Legion Poppy Appeal. We'd ridden to Brussels, and we had rides to Paris and Lausanne in Switzerland. And he'd ridden one of those, and once they'd done a couple of Cycle to MIPIMs, or Cycle to Cannes as it was then, they were looking for somebody to take on the organisation of it full time. And so he got in contact with me, and it came at the right time, and it was a great opportunity, and I've not really looked back since. And
in the between now and next March, I mean, you answered David's question talking about next MIPIM, but presumably, I mean, you and I were talking about a ride in Scotland in the autumn. There was a cycle to Munich last year, wasn't there? What can we expect from now to March in terms of Club Peloton activity?
Well, a lot of what we do will be driven by what our survey says. And I think realistically, it's going to be safer and more practical for us to concentrate on doing stuff in the UK. And doing stuff in the UK up until a hopeful MIPIM ride in March. We'd really love to engage with the community again, and the easiest way to do that may be to take Club Peloton around the UK and to do a series of rides in the southwest, the northwest, the northeast, the southeast, Scotland, and to engage with kind of our riders that way.
What sort of timing might there be on that?
Oh, I think realistically, we would be looking at sort of late September, early October for the first one of those to happen. And if they could happen once a month in the build up to a MIPIM ride, that would be great. We've all seen that MAPIC is going ahead, or at least they're advertising that it's going ahead. If it were to go ahead and there was some interest and we felt it was safe and reasonable to do something, and there was a small group of people who wanted to ride, then we would probably put on a small MAPIC ride. But the sands shift so quickly in this crisis we find ourselves in that we need to be able to be reactive pretty quickly and adapt. But I think realistically, we're looking at some monthly one-day rides around the UK to bring people together initially.
Fantastic. And I know David wants to sort of take the conversation in a slightly different direction, but just before you do, David, viewers out there, I imagine that you've got some questions based on what Nick's just said, and even if it's just to write in and tell us that you do want to take part in some of those activities that Nick's mentioned, use the Q&A function on your screens now. And any questions you want to put to Nick, we'll answer towards the end of the half hour, which is coming up in probably in about 10 minutes or so. So we look forward to that. David?
Yeah, we've also got a quick fire round coming up as well. And I have a stunning prop to announce it unexpectedly. It's my daughter's bell. So when you hear that noise, we shall break into some very quick fire questions. But yeah, the next direction, I suppose, is a sort of pretty serious one, I think. That has arisen across the world in the last months, and it's that of diversity. We're three white middle-aged blokes sat on bikes. How do we get people less like us sat on bikes? Nick, what's your view about A, how we do that as a community, and B, how you do that or help to do that as an organisation?
Well, I guess there's two parts to this. One is that cycling is not very diverse currently. It's, I think, an 80-20 split just on gender grounds. So that's something we've tried to address already with Padel, and that's been paying great dividends in the number of people that ride. But from an ethnic diversity point of view, kind of the industry and as real estate and cycling have got an awful lot of work to do. We started exploring some ideas internally about how Club Peloton could do this. One of the ideas is that we obviously have a number of charity partners that we support throughout the year, and they are working with some very disadvantaged groups of people, young people, and we think that we should be able to engage the Club Peloton community and the businesses that support us in providing some form of work experience for these kids, to come and show them what opportunities there are in the real estate industry, and to show them jobs and careers that they might never have thought of. And that may go some way to start the process of getting people from a more diverse range of backgrounds into the industry. And, and in time that will feed into people who are riding bikes within the industry and into our events. But it's, it's a very complex mix. And I think, from where we're working within the industry, I think that's a great way and a very manageable way of delivering something that has a long-term benefit.
And what about us as individuals would you recommend? What can we do? What can the people who are looking at this do individually, do you think?
Well, in terms of, if you think about diversity in cycling, the last few months have shown us that a lot of people have taken up cycling and are considering it as potentially a means to commute when people are back in their offices. And that's, a real crunch point. Sinead, in her chat with you both a couple of weeks ago, mentioned an idea of buddy system, and that's something that we're going to look at. So whereby Club Peloton riders could, in effect, put themselves forward as buddies to help people navigate, the first few weeks of their new commute, help give them confidence, answer any questions, and just have a very kind of relaxed way and supportive way of getting into cycling, to the office. Another thing that we could do is that, we're obviously not doing any events at the moment. We've got a huge stack of bike racks doing nothing. We've already lent some out to HTA, who are one of our sponsors for MIPIM. They're using them in preparation for a number of people coming back to work in the office and who are going to be commuting in on bikes, and they don't have the bike storage facilities currently, so we've loaned them some racks. So I'd love to say, if you're looking for some storage capacity for the increase in bikes you're expecting, then do get in contact and we will more than happily lend them out to you.
Just on a general point, I was wondering about your role and what your favourite element of it is. What's the best thing about your job, would you say?
Probably a couple of things, to be honest. We see people go on a journey in terms of their cycling ability, challenging themselves to do something which from the outset looks physically impossible, but is manageable. And we've seen people start out with having no bike and end up riding 1,000 kilometers over 6 days. So one thing is seeing that journey of people's kind of experience of getting into cycling and finding the joys of it. And I guess the other thing is the travel, seeing places. You see so much more by bike. Whizzing past in a car, you miss so much. You smell so little, you taste so little. Cycling really puts you back in the mix with kind of what's around you. And that's what I love about it and the travel that comes with it.
Have you got any funny? No worries. Have you got any funny stories you can share from the crew, Nick? I mean, you're all sat there behind us in the van all through all those days and weeks. There must be some fairly comedic stuff that goes on that you don't share with us at the time.
There's always laughter. It's the only way to get through the long days. But there is a story of one MIPIM probably about 5 years ago, and we just call it the toilet incident. We have a porta potty in the back of one of the vans, which is sort of a camping toilet, and that is strapped down, and it's there for the women to use when we stop in the middle of nowhere for impromptu toilet stops. We were driving down a French country road, and there was a big dip in it, and there was a big kind of gully gutter running across it. as you hit the bottom of the dip. And there was no warning of it, and we went through it, and our vehicle bounced, quite heavily, and we just looked in the mirror behind, and one of the vans carrying this toilet, we knew was going to hit it quite hard, and they did, and then we got to the next stop, and the toilet had managed to dislodge itself and empty its contents all over the van, and there was obviously a deep clean that was needed, but there was a lot of laughter about who was going to do it and who pulled the short straw. But it brings a smile to certain crew members' faces every time.
Club Peloton.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Man.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well,
there was another one actually where
yeah.
I think my very first cycle to MIPIM, Barry Hughes, who used to work for HOK, is now based out in LA.
He was my roommate on my first MIPIM.
Really?
Yes.
He was due to do the baton presentation when we got to the Palais in Cannes for MIPIM. As the London stand was opened, and I gave it to him. He said, "I'm just going to the toilet." He came back, and I said, "Have you got the baton?" He went, "No." And he said, "Oh, I've left it in the toilet." And so he went back, couldn't find it, checked the bin, checked everywhere. We literally carried this thing for 1,500 Ks, and he went to the toilet and lost it.
Are there any non-toilet anecdotes you've got, Nick, or is it just all?
Is it all bog
facility?
No. They just happen to be two fine examples.
Right.
Right, we've got loads of questions lined up, which we'll get to in a short second, I guess. But first, quick fire round.
Right, Nick. Okay, first question, very quick. What was your favourite ride?
Favourite ride was, personally, the Stelvio that I did with you guys actually a couple of years ago. That was an amazing achievement for me personally, and I loved the scenery.
Excellent. Ring the bell. Quick fire.
Quick fire.
Nick, what's your favourite bike?
Well, my favourite bike is my first bike, a Rally Striker.
With a Y, yes? With a Y. YKA. I've got it. Right.
Ring the bell.
Favourite piece of kit?
My Wahoo, because it works. It's reliable. It's brilliant. It never let me down in 3 years of having it.
Quick fire. What's your favourite on-bike snack?
It's flapjack, probably. Flapjack.
What, with fruit, with nuts, with chocolate?
With fruit and nuts, homemade, if I can.
Do you make them yourself?
All my kids do.
Good fire. What is the next piece of bike equipment that you will purchase?
Well, I just bought some new wheels recently.
Ooh.
So that was in preparation for MIPIM.
What make?
The next kit, probably a new saddle, I think.
Okay, yeah. What, for the Striker?
For the Striker, yeah. Make it go faster.
Right, quick fire. What's your single favourite moment on a bike so far?
About 2 years ago, I rode to Paris with Zachary, my middle son, and he was 9 at the time. And just seeing the sheer delight on his face of having reached Paris and realising what he could do if he put his mind to it. That was amazing.
And B, the fact that he wouldn't have to spend the next few days with you. Yeah.
Favourite city to cycle in and why?
Favourite city to cycle in. I'm torn between amazing infrastructure in continental Europe and seeing the sights when you ride around London. I love riding along the super highway along the embankment in London. I think it's amazing.
Quick fire. This may be my last one. Is there anything in cycling that intimidates you? Is there a challenge that you think about sometimes and think, no, there's no way that I could do that, but you've got a sneaking suspicion that one day you might try it?
There's one thing that's kind of intrigued me. There's a climb in Colombia. I think it's the longest continuous climb in the world. I don't know, 100 miles or 100 Ks or something. I just feel that has a calling at some point in time.
Colombia. I see. Gotcha.
Nice one.
I think we're probably out of quick fire.
Is that the end of quick fire?
Yeah, end of quick fire. So we should go down to the questions now. So have you got access to them?
Yeah, well, I'm guessing it's Chris. Someone just posting as Symmetrist, but I'm guessing that's Chris Atkins. Yeah. He's asking about the loss of revenue to Quorum and your other charities. You've talked about some Club Peloton activities with mentoring kids and so on that might be helpful. But are there other ways that that your members, your community, can raise money for the charities?
I mean, part of what we're doing now that we're all back from furlough is scoping out what opportunities there are and how we best kind of plug the gap. You know, we're mindful that, you know, the reality is our turnover as a business, as a charity, is pretty much halved. You know, MIPIM was the lion's share of what we do. So we need to find new ways to innovate and to raise funds for the charities and to keep Club Peloton going and for it to flourish. So we will kind of outline some ideas in the coming kind of month to 6 weeks, and we really want people in our community to be part of that conversation. So, you know, there will be an opportunity for people to share ideas and to work with us on that.
Fantastic. And who else? We've got Steve. I think this may be Steve Walker. I'm not sure. He's just wants to make the point that these morning Zwift and Zoom rides organised by you and John Norden in particular have been a great way to stay fit, sane and connected. They're still going strong if more people want to join. It's a kind of call out to ask people to get involved in those. Nick, how do they do that? How do they get involved?
So every week we post on the live feed of the website the Zoom and Zwift codes, and all the instructions are there for joining. But if you've got any questions, just leave a message on the website or email me, nick@clubpeloton.org, and I can help you out.
Joe?
Oh yeah, I'd love one. Thanks very much. Yeah.
We're gonna have a lot of very fit riders.
Really, baby?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of fit riders. Absolutely. Yeah, and I guess David, you may have a view on this. This is Rory writing in about the Map It route, because you've done that a few times, haven't you? Yeah. Rory's saying that last year's route to Map It was particularly special. Please, can we try that again? I guess you've sort of already answered that.
I mean, yes, we need to take the temperature of what businesses are going, who's interested in riding, and see how that might work. So last year we went from Le Puy, where Puy lentils come from, to Cannes, and it was stunning. And we went through the Gorge de Verdon. We have in the past ridden from Girona on the coast in Spain. So, you know, we have a number of options to explore, but we just want to get out and ride our bikes, but we need to make sure we do it in a safe way, and a way which is profitable and makes enough money for charity.
On that note, what's your view? What's Club Peloton's sort of official view on group cycling? When Robin Cheesewright's written in to say that sweat droplets can travel 10 to 20 meters. Have you got a sort of line of advice?
Well, we haven't obviously done our own testing, but you know, we are guided by British Cycling. That's where we're taking our guidance from, and that's obviously then dictated by government advice. And I think that, you know, we need to make sure that we don't rush into anything that's going to jeopardise kind of the hard work that's being done by everybody in kind of dampening down the spread of the virus. That's the last thing that we want to do. But at the same time, we need to find a safe way for us to all get back riding. So it may be that, you know, we need to go out riding in smaller groups as part of a larger event, in the way that, you know, a lot of people now are, you know, they've ditched their turbos and they're back out riding with small groups of friends. And maybe we just need to replicate that at a larger scale with the Club Peloton community.
David, Robin's sweat travels 10 to 20 meters. How far do your sweat droplets travel?
A couple of miles sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, or kilometers.
Have you been on Channel 4 with those?
I'm not going there. There was a very bad program last night about a man who had problems with his undercarriage. Anyway, Nick, to try and get some sense of seriousness back into this session. What are your thoughts about where we stand as a nation in terms of cycling and infrastructure? Where do you think we are? I mean, not a day goes past without me watching footage of Paris and sort of slightly envious of the way they've acted very quickly to improve the city in terms of cycling. Where do you think we are, and where do you think we'll be in 5 years' time?
Well, I think obviously, the pandemic has accelerated the opportunity for change and the speed at which that can happen. I think that, I think our biggest hopes won't be realised, but there will be change. I think that's the reality of it. It is, when I think about what's happened where I live, there are temporary width restrictions to pavements and the removal of lanes for traffic so that people can socially distance more. But and that works in a small market town where I live. But when you go into central London, the danger for the cycling community and I guess the stickiness of this stuff staying around is that if people aren't working in the city centres, then you're not going to have the volume of cyclists using the infrastructure. But you're still going to have the traffic jams. And my fear is that the traffic jams will be around for quite some time before cyclists are able to return because they're just simply not going into the offices. Having said that, I think this will accelerate some change, and I think kind of the braver politicians who are in our parliaments and administrations will be the ones that win long term. And I just hope that politicians do start to think a bit more long term about the kind of society we want to live in and the kind of environment we want our kids to grow up in and for ourselves to thrive in.
I think Mike Axon has written in to ask, sort of segueing on for that, would you ever consider at Club Peloton becoming an organisation that lobbies for and promotes cycling infrastructure, either for leisure or utilitarian work purposes?
We have actually given a small grant to London Cycling Campaign, and we have done some lobbying work in the past. We've always been keen to support the promotion of good, reliable and usable cycling infrastructure. But I think Club Peloton can act as a way of amplifying those voices, but where we have no plans currently to be a campaigner. There's lots of brilliant, talented people already doing that, and we can just help amplify the messages that they're putting out.
And you picked up earlier on, or what Sinead was suggesting last week about mentoring. Jono's writing in asking if he's complaining about amateurs on the road. One of the biggest dangers at the moment is inexperienced riders trying to commute. And I think Chris Froome is pretty inexperienced compared to you, Jono. But can we raise the profile, starting up with sort of semi-organised small groups for commuters, bike buddies, and get that advertised through the property community, which plays into what Sinead was saying, really. Is that, what concrete steps can we expect on that, Nick?
I think, the new platform on which our website is built has the opportunity to link people together and for some form of buddying system to, kind of seed and bear some fruit. So we're looking into the technicalities of how we make that work and how we can marry up people that, do want to commute in from South East London, South West London, the north of London, into the city and the West End. And, I think that's the best thing we can do is I think, one of my pet hates about cycling or the cycling community is that sometimes it can be dismissive of others, and it's really hard. It's the same when you're driving a car and there's a learner driver and they're hesitant, they're nervous, and they're therefore more likely to have an accident. And I think we all have a responsibility to nurture those people going through those first steps on their bike, to stick with cycling and to not put them off by inferring that they've either got the wrong bike or they're wearing the wrong kit, and that, anything goes.
Fantastic. Well, that brings us neatly round to 2:30, I think. And sadly, we're going to have to say goodbye. So it just remains to thank Club Peloton for arranging this session, and the Club Peloton community for joining us and answering asking such vigorous questions, demanding that Nick's sweat droplets fly meters from his forehead in answering them. David and I would also like to thank the Velocity community who supported us through the last 3 years or so of producing Velocity magazine. We're very grateful. And there's a new issue in production as we speak. I'd like to thank David for his help and support in our work together on that. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm looking forward to continuing it. And I'd like to thank my other fellow rider today, Nick Hanmer, for taking the time to talk to us and talk to the community out there. So we'll look forward to riding with you all again at some point in the near future. And until then, we'll be seeing you.
Thank you.